Welcome back, Wuyang and Weeboos, to the channel Division Doge, where today we're doing another Yap video about Stadium. Once again, I continue to be in this constant state of flux of, oh my god, I hate Stadium, oh my god, I kind of love Stadium, I'm learning to like it, oh my god, I hate Stadium, you know what, I'm learning to like it, oh my god, I hate Stadium. But anyway, I'm still tentatively giving it a chance right now. That being said, I also want to be honest. I think this season's Stadium showings are quite weak. Now, I'm not here to moan about Stadium not getting enough content, because quite frankly, if anything, most people right now would probably think it gets too much content, considering it seems to have experienced quite a drop-off, or at least it appears, in approval in the community, something I can understand, and considering that fewer people are playing it, it feels disappointing that more and more it's becoming the majority of new content every season, when it seems most players have moved on from it. It's less so about the quantity of the content and more so about the quality here. Either way, this season brought us two new characters, Doomfist in the tank role and Wuyang in the support role, and instead of getting a new DPS, we instead just got a rework for Cass. Funnily enough though, I'm going to be direct here. I actually think the rework for Cass was more valuable than both the addition of Wuyang and Doomfist, and I can't believe I'm saying that, considering both Wuyang and especially Doomfist were characters I expected to translate very well into Stadium and be very fun in the mode. But quite frankly, I'm pretty disappointed with the both of them. More so Doomfist. In fact, extremely Doomfist. I'm not going to lie. If you haven't played Doomfist in Stadium yet, if you aren't already somewhat of a Doom connoisseur, don't. That's my advice. Not only because he is considered by most people to be ungodly weak right now and unplayable, but on top of that, even if you are decent with him, you are going to be a magnet for flame if you play Doomfist, no matter how nicely you play him. No matter how much of a team player you are, no matter how often you take one for the team, your team will hate you because you picked Doomfist. This is already a thing in the base game, but at least in the base game it's much more toned down, and there's more of an ability to just show people, look, I'm doing a good job, can you get off my ass? And they might eventually go, fine, you're doing a good job, I just don't like playing with Doom. In Stadium, that doesn't happen. I'm just gonna be real with you, my biggest problem with Stadium isn't even really to do with the gameplay itself, it's to do with the fact it seems to have been a magnet for all the most toxic players in the community. So you get much less cooperative teammates, and you get much more people crashing out and flaming each other in Stadium, even if there's really no need for it. So yeah, unless you already are pretty good at Doomfist in the base game, I would not touch Doomfist in Stadium. Now me personally, I'm in an awkward position of being on the line. I'm a pretty good Doomfist, but I'm no Doomfist one-trick. I put a lot of time and effort into trying to get good at Doomfist, because I do think he's extremely fun, and I think that people really underrate how difficult he is. I still think he is definitely top 3 most difficult characters in the game. Maybe even the most difficult, depending on your perspective. And I feel like he doesn't really get that credit. And honestly, I have a lot of respect for people who can play Doom very well, so I always like the idea of being one. That being said, what's my experience been with playing Doomfist in Stadium? It has been agony. I was really anticipating him as a character as well. However, actually playing him, I'm very disappointed. And the weirdest part is, I feel a little bad, because the way in which he ended up being worse than I expected is something that's kind of depressing to say, because it should be a good thing. They kind of got a little too creative with his powers. If anything, I was worried about the opposite. I was worried that they were going to squander the potential to do so many interesting things with Doomfist's powers. And they haven't done that, in fairness, in concept. There's a lot of cool, wacky concepts in here, but a lot of these cool, wacky concepts just suck to use, quite simply. And so he doesn't really end up being a super fun character to play as a result. Now, have I found a way to make Doomfist work? Yes. Despite the fact that this is considered an ungodly throw pick right now, I still have won 6 out of my 10 games on Doomfist so far this season. So, we're just barely positive. How have I managed that? Well, I figured out what works. I'm going to be real with you, the fun way to play Doomfist should be AP Doomfist, but I think AP Doomfist is unplayable. I think it's god-awful, and I think that's depressing. For most of this video, I'm going to have pre-made builds that aren't even necessarily what I've been using, because I tend to be pretty free-flowing. I don't use pre-made builds, I make stuff up as I go when I play Stadium, and I adapt to the circumstances, so I'm not always running the same thing. But while I've got some of these prepared, just for the sake of demonstration, even if this isn't exactly what I'm using, it's just generally what I'm using, when it comes to AP Doom, it's such a mess that I couldn't even really make a build to show off beforehand. I just have to show you, like, each part of the package. So, long story short, let's start by focusing on punch, because that's an easy thing to focus on. If you want to get your punch stronger, you have 3 options. One of the only options that's just a general good pick is Jet Force Jab, which just gives you 15% extra damage as a burn DOT over 3 seconds, and the ability for Rocket Punch to punch directly through people so that you have the ability to hit multiple people more easily. This is, in theory, a nice buff, and in fairness, it is 15% extra damage for free, but it also has the big downside of... That is weird. This screws with your muscle memory as a Doomfist player so bad, and there are loads of situations where the supposed upside of being able to punch directly through people is actually a massive downside, because of the fact that, well, let me just put it this way. You know how it's like the typical embarrassing thing for a Doomfist to do, that like they try to punch a Kiriko off the map and she Suzus and you punch right through her and fall off the map? Now imagine that's just every single punch you do. Like every single time you want to punch someone off the map, you have to go off the map too. Like, there's no option, even if you land the punch, even if you time it well, you connect it, there's no option to not fall off the map. If you don't have your leap and you punch off the map to try and get someone off the map, you're just off the map. You're dead. Or how about you're trying to get out, but you just want to quickly punch someone off of you on the way out, but now, instead of just being able to punch into them and jump away, when you punch into them, you go directly through them and inside enemy spawn and then die. The amount of times at which the ability to go through people actually screws you over is pretty dangerous. So even this, being the closest thing to just a free power you can take, is already something that introduces quite a lot of downside, even if it does give you a bit of upside. But hey, maybe you'll have better luck with Boomfist. Well, I don't know about that one. Boomfist is, yes, powerful in the right context, but also very situational and very dependent on the enemy comp. Essentially, every single time you hit more than one person with Rocket Punch, every extra person you hit gives you an extra 5% ultimate charge bonus and a 0.5 second cooldown reduction to power block. Don't get me wrong, when the enemies are playing clumped up, and bearing in mind that you have this punch through thing and you have a 4-second cooldown punch that you can reduce even more by taking, you know, cooldown reduction items, you can actually get a ludicrous amount of ultimate charge off of this. But overall, I gotta say, I think this power is pretty weak, both because you're talking about a character with one of the worst ultimates in the game, and also because the fact that the cooldown reduction is pitiful. Like, I'd understand if they had to be this small for Punch, because Punch is an impactful cooldown, but it's also only 4 seconds. So a half a second reduction would be a big deal, but Power Block, is it 8 or 9 seconds? Oh, is it 7? Oh wait, I think it's 8, but like it starts at 7, if you know what I mean. Like, it immediately goes to 7. But it is... I think it's 8. I'm pretty sure it's 8. I want to say it's 8. Yeah. So anyway, so I don't think a half a second reduction is a big deal really here, especially considering this is a situational trigger. Lastly, you have Overpowered, which just makes it so that you can further empower Rocket Punch with blocking. Which, don't get me wrong, like, I think this one is decent. It's just like... the reward you're going to get for getting all this over-blocking is only 25% extra damage and 50% extra distance. And it's hard to even, like, I don't even think I can show this off in the practice range, come to think of it, because the problem is it resets. Actually, you know what, for once I might actually want to take this item. There's an item that makes it so that it remembers the progress. So it should remember how charged that was. And then when I get my next block, it should then be fully charged. Okay, come on. There we go. Okay, this is full charge. Let's go. Okay, yeah. So that's 25% extra damage and 50% extra distance. As you can see, though, you're going to have to take a lot of damage. Though, in fairness, in Stadium, with ramping damage, that might not be too difficult. But, yeah, it's not a huge benefit. Though, honestly, it might be the best out of the 3, even though I will admit I've not played that much with it. So, yeah. The punch powers are pretty underwhelming, and this is almost the best it gets. The slam powers, okay, in fairness, Aftershock is okay. Aftershock is just basically 50% extra damage on slam, but it's delayed, the extra 50%. It's good for triggering the best defense to get more overhealth from dealing more ability damage, and is good just for general AoE and proccing your passive and all that. And of course, it can be stacked with other damage multipliers, and just the fact it's 1.5 times damage is nice, but Seismic Slam on its own already does very little damage. You do have Slam Wham, which is something that you can take to... Can I get a punch bounce here? Like that, yeah. The further you fall when you use your slam, you get more damage, so that should do 50, but instead it did 67 and then 33. So I went from dealing 75 damage in total to 100 damage in total. But you might notice that's actually not a super big bump. That's still not a whole lot of damage, especially considering they've got to get hit by both hits of that, and you've got to do the setup. You know, you've got to have somewhere you can punch bounce, and then you've got to have all this fall, and you've got to have them knock out of the way, and then your reward is, okay, you do 25 extra damage. Which is a little underwhelming considering that's combining multiple powers. So yeah, the slam sort of setup is not great either. And then you got Seismic Rally, which is just a deeply weird one. While you're midair with Seismic Slam, but you haven't hit the ground yet, allies with LOS to you get overhealth. I don't mind teamwork ones, but this one completely throws me off because if you are slamming in as Doomfist, there is a very low chance you have line of sight to your teammates. Like, don't get me wrong, it's great if you do, and if you can, it's best. But like, you know what it's like when you play Doomfist. Like, things get hectic really quickly, and you can't really be in situations where you are going to get a slam that's going to have loads of airtime while also having LOS to loads of people who also know they're going to get the buff and also will use the overhealth. This is just, it requires a miracle to actually do anything. So, once again, we've got a pretty bad setup. This is technically not an AP item, but it's clearly meant to be synergized with all these height things. You do have Uppercut from DPS Doom as a power that's activated from a quick melee. So that definitely is intended to help out with all this height-based stuff. And speaking of height-based stuff, finally we have Asteroid Smash, where basically you can do a mini Meteor Slam by crouching midair on a 15-second cooldown. It's cool, but it is bad. Like, it's just really bad. Like, okay, let's just get to the absolute just maximum of, like, best case scenario. Okay, just a moment. You know what? The ceiling's already pretty low here, so it's probably best we do this the easy way. That, I didn't see the number, but that looked like about 200-ish. That's like a best case scenario, man. Like, all that height, all this AP, you slam on a 15-second cooldown, you do that, and you do that little damage. Like, you gotta remember that, like, if you're this late in the game as well, there's gonna be people, like, the squishies are gonna have nearly 500 health, and you're only gonna be dealing, like, 200 damage in a perfect scenario with the slam. It is pitiful. AP Doom is a train wreck, and you really shouldn't play it, which is a shame, because it's kind of where all the fun stuff is. As for the best way to play him, well, first of all, just very quickly, you might notice I've got this early game thing here. For those of you who don't remember from previous videos, essentially, when I make stadium builds, I do not include any of the kind of stuff I would usually take in round 1, or sometimes even round 2. And the reason for that is, in almost every case, the kind of stuff I'm going to take on round 1, and sometimes even round 2, on a character, is literally nothing to do with the build that I will eventually use. The powers might be, but the items, I'm literally just taking whatever's best round 1. Because I don't yet have a synergy. So there's no point in taking items for my synergy if my synergy doesn't exist yet. I'm just going to take whatever items are best on my character and best for the situation. So for Doomfist, my typical opening is Compensator, Power Playbook, and Ammo Reserves. Just extra weapon power, extra AP, and an ammo boost so you get 5 shots instead of 4, because that is basically a 25% damage buff, considering how quickly you run out of ammo on Doom. You're very regularly going to be using your whole clip. So obviously getting a 25% damage buff when a 5% one is already worth it for only 1,500 credits, obviously a good deal. In the late game category, I have stuff that I wouldn't usually take, and I don't think is a good idea typically, but I think if you really know what you're doing, they are very greedy picks that can pay off if you're certain they will pay off, but I typically wouldn't take them. So there's Charge Plating, of course. I don't think you're usually going to get your ultimate consistently early enough that you're going to get the value off of this, but if you can, it's really good. And Frenzy Amplifier, I think, is actually a pretty bad item overall, but obviously Doomfist is one of the main characters you would try it on if you wanted to make use of it, so some people like taking it. I personally am not a big fan of it, but it's here as an option. And then Flex is just what you think. Situational stuff, like if they got a lot of CC, then Reflect Coating is just extra health. If you actually really want to use your ultimate for some reason, Winning Attitude. And Lifesteal, I think, is usually not worth it, but if you do want weapon lifesteal, if you really want to go all in weapon power for your early game, and you think that lifesteal will be good, then there it is. So yeah, either way, speaking of weapon power, that, I think, is the best way to play Doomfist, if you are confident with your Doomfist. I have played a decent amount of Doomfist at this point, and this is the only build where I have consistently been able to get active and take control of the game. Even then, I am usually just barely eking out a win while having to fry my mental circuits, just barely staying alive. But you know what? I've won with it. I haven't dropped a game yet on Weapon Power Doom. Now I've only played 3, but still, I have just barely avoided losing all 3 of them. All of them have been very, very close, but I've just barely clinched a win in all of them. So, yeah. I think this is the best build to play if you want to like lock in, get real good at Doomfist, and see if you can make him work. But even then, I'm going to be real with you. You are going to have to try so much harder than everyone else in the lobby to get the same results. Either way, you just start with Rising Uppercut because it's an extra cooldown. It's just quite valuable. It's not even really got synergy here. It just does weapon damage, and it's another cooldown to use, so it's nice to have. You take the bestest defense so that your passive can trigger off of quick melees and headshots so that you don't lose a bunch of overhealth from not dealing ability damage as much. But even then, this is something that really sucks. After these two, you basically got nothing that's actually good with weapon power for Doomfist. And a lot of this stuff is just so weird and janky that, like, it's really hard to pick your powers from here. So I do take Jab Cross, but honestly, you could remove it. This makes it so that when you use an ability for the next 3 seconds, you quick melee faster. And your quick melee is... oh yeah, I forgot about the uppercut. Your quick melee is based off of weapon power, so you will do more damage with quick melee if you have more weapon power. It also scales off attack speed, so those both work. However, it is just always going to deal more damage to shoot rather than melee, which I know should be obvious, but yeah. And it's so much more damage that even if you're struggling to track a target, I would usually say you should just try and hit the shot, even if it's difficult, rather than go for the melee, unless you know that 1, maybe 2 melees will kill them. If you're certain 1, maybe 2 melees will kill them, then you can go for the melees. But I think unless they're in that range, you should just shoot. Especially if you take ammo buffs, then you also won't usually be out of ammo. And even once you're out of ammo, you usually lose the attack speed boost. So you're in this awkward place where this power is not even really good. Like, for the build, it's a quirky idea, it's fun, but, like, it's actually not very practical usually, but it's also, like, there are so few powers here that are, like, even usable that you might as well take it in a lot of situations, which is kind of depressing. And then for the last power, I have Block Party. This is actually nothing to do with the synergy once again. It's just a way to heal yourself, which is kind of important considering you're going to be hard to pocket as Doomfist. You're going to have to play very, very safe to get pocket, and oftentimes if you play very, very safe, you're going to get surrounded, you're going to do a bad job of making space, and yeah, it's going to end badly. So while you've got to find a good balance, you definitely want to have some ability to just heal yourself and pocket yourself a little bit. And you can also heal people for standing near you with this, which is a good way to farm credits, which, by the way, it's very hard to earn credits on Doomfist, so if you need to farm credits, you can try and AoE heal with Block Party if people are playing clumped, and that's a good way to farm them. So, there you go. Not super important all the stuff here. I already explained why ammo is important. Cooldown reduction is still really good even with weapon power builds, just because you need to use your cooldowns all the time to move around and get in range to hit people. Weapon power stuff just to do more damage. Stuff to go through armor, because armor is actually a bit of a problem for Doomfist. His primary fire is very heavily negated by armor compared to most things, so having Codebreak is decent. Loaded Knuckles is his only weapon unique item and is actually pretty good. More melee damage, more armor. If you quick melee someone, you immediately get 1 ammo back. If you rocket punch someone, you get all your ammo back. Actually a pretty damn good item. Either spider more damage, the closer more damage. In terms of the flex slot, we've got Doomfist, which I think is one of his few items that is exclusive to him that's actually really good in basically every build. Whenever you gain overhealth that came from yourself, you heal for 15% extra of the overhealth gained, and you also gain 15% move speed. Now, bearing in mind you gain overhealth whenever you trigger your passive, which triggers every single time you deal ability damage of any kind, and also whenever you hit a headshot or a quick melee when you take the bestest defense. That basically means whenever you do literally anything on Doomfist, you get a bit of overhealth, you get a bit of healing with that overhealth, and then you also get 15% move speed, so you can be way, way faster. So Doomfist is pretty good. Gloom Gauntlet obviously is just here because there's so much quick melee stuff, you may as well take it. It gives healing and move speed, that's nice. Vanadium Injection, it's up to you whether you want to use your ultimate or not. Your ultimate does suck, but there are so many situations as Doomfist where you're forced to go in. Like, you really don't want to go in, but you have to go in, and you know it's going to end badly, and you know the only way you're living is to pop your ult. So it's up to you whether you think you want to keep your ult or not, but if you do decide to play without your ult, this is obviously a really, really good item, and I would recommend doing it. Like, I definitely would lean towards try to take this item, even if, if you really think you need your ultimate, then don't, but usually I would take this. And lastly, cushion padding. I'm going to be real with you. I think this is one of the most underrated items in all Stadium. You're going to see this in almost every build. If there is even a single person who semi-regularly stuns, sleeps, or hinders you, restoring 10% of your life back over the next 3 seconds, while also receiving 40% less of the effect, which also applies to every single DOT in the game, including Queen wounds, by the way. So against Queen, this means she gets less damage and less lifesteal, so she heals less. While also giving shields, this is a really goddamn good item. If there is anything that gets decent use off of this, you should take it every time. So you're going to see this in the flex slot a lot. Anyway, so yeah, that's Weapon Power Doom, and I think that's the best way to play it. And you might be thinking, okay, right, that didn't really seem super good, though. Is it really that bad? This is the best you can do. Well, the main reason why is because if you actually get all this stuff, it might not have looked super impressive, what we're showing off here, but let's say this is what you probably usually have as your setup in the late game. I just want to show you this. Now, in fairness, this Roadhog doesn't have any items, but he's still 750 HP. And you can see just how much damage you can do with your primary fire here. And then remember the fact that, like, if I start using this to kill some of these, and then I run out of ammo, boom, all my ammo's back, punch, more ammo, you get the point. You can shoot pretty repeatedly. So that's really, really good. Now, compare that to a full-in AP build. I don't know, and then just go all in on AP, I feel like there should be a 20% here, but I'm not remembering. Whatever. AP, and then it's like, okay, I'm gonna slam. Oh my god, that. Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. I'm gonna slam, and then do a fully charged punch. And let's see how much damage that is. Barely half of his health pool. Yeah, you can see the difference. It is not very good. So, yeah. I do think that the best way to try and kill people in Doomfist is to take weapon power. So, yeah. I'd also like to mention on the side a proposed buff to Doomfist in general. It wouldn't fix everything. But can I just point out, if you actually look at the list of things that AP boosts, it does not boost your passive, the best defense, which again, a lot of people forget it exists, but it's important on Doomfist. Dealing damage with abilities creates temporary overhealth. So it is 40 overhealth for a normal ability and 75 for an ultimate. Now, the reason why I think this should be boosted by AP is because of the fact that every single other ability in the game that gives gives overhealth is boosted by AP. Orissa's Fortify gives more overhealth if you take AP. Junker Queen Shout gives more overhealth if you take AP. And you could argue it's a passive, but I don't even think that really works, because passives that grant healing based on, like, you know, a passive or an ability, if you take AP, it boosts the healing from that passive and all that. So there is no reason that the best defense shouldn't get a boost from AP. And considering AP is so god-awful and Doomfist struggles so much to live, I think he really could use that. I mean, he's already got a lot of building blocks here of stuff that helps you if you are trying to abuse the best defense. I feel like they should really let AP boost the amount of overhealth it gives. But anyway, that brings us to the other way to play Doomfist that is depressing but unfortunately works. You see, this is going to sound, like, really stupid, but I don't know. I don't know if there's any way I can convince you if you're not already going to be convinced. This is a build where I end almost every game looking pathetic. If you press tab, it's like, okay, I have killed, like, 2 people, I have died once, I have done, like, barely 1,000 damage, the rest of my team has 20 kills plus, and, like, they have, like, literally 10 times my damage. It looks like I've done nothing. But I win. And I keep winning. And consistently, when I play this build, I am basically a punching bag. And it sucks. But it works. And it really shouldn't, but it does. So, essentially, the idea here is that I already knew going in that people in Stadium, unfortunately, have kind of been conditioned, due to the way the mode has been in recent times, to play extremely passive and scared. And that means that while there is a lot of potential for a dive character to get a lot done in the mode, because of the fact that the average player in this mode plays extremely passive and extremely selfish, like even more so than the average Overwatch player in, like, a random lobby, like, triple the amount. I don't know if I'm going to throw out a gut feeling. That means that even if you are doing the right thing with your dives, a lot of the time you're just not going to get the results because no one is working with you. And that is agonizing. So I thought, okay, I still want to play Doomfist, but I realized this is going to be a big problem. So immediately the first thing I wanted to do, this is actually the first build I played, was I thought, okay, let's do a team play kind of Doomfist. Let's play a kind of Doomfist where I can play it slow, which is probably going to be survivability based. And sure enough, I caught my eye with a block party, where you get self-heal based on your life while blocking, that also can be shared with allies nearby for a big AoE heal if they do stand near you. And essentially, I actually do think this is Doomfist's best power, funnily enough. I think I stumbled right into it. Because, unfortunately, there are a lot of situations where you just have to be the punching bag as Doomfist. Like, you could go in, but the chances of it working out, even if you're very good at Doomfist, are very, very low, and you are probably going to feed. So there's a lot of situations where all you can do is threaten that you might go in. You have to at least threaten it. If you don't threaten it, then you literally will make no space and just not even be a tank. You have to at least scare people into thinking, oh, I've got to back up. The Doomfist is taking this angle. Like, I would love to take this high ground, but he's got his punch charged up. If I keep walking up here, I'm going to die. I'm going to get out of here. And don't get me wrong, it's annoying. God, is it annoying that basically the whole time you're playing Doomfist like this, you're basically jumping at people, scaring them, and then they just burn all their mobility to run away from you, or burn all their cooldowns to survive whatever you've got to do to them. It sucks. But it kind of works. They don't really get a lot of map control, because anytime they try to go anywhere, you can scare them off. And yeah, you can't really kill them, but they can't really kill you. You have an enormous health bar, you're constantly gaining overhealth, you're healing people who stand near you, which makes it easier for your supports to pocket you. You just have to... You start a dive, you kind of bait that you're going to do something, and then you usually charge your punch at someone, and then instead of actually punching at them, you turn around at the last second, jump back into your team, and hold block and face the enemies. And you often can mitigate a lot of damage doing that, and you can tank a lot of pressure. It sucks, because you never get to do anything. You're always just, like, aura farming and going, oh, I'm so scary, right? Run away from me. Okay, right, I'm going back. Oh, I'm so scary, run away from me. But again, depressingly, it works. Seriously, I'm winning most of my games playing like this. The games I've been losing have mostly been the games where I've been trying to make AP Doom work, whereas this has been working much, much better. So yes, you take Block Party, you take Helping Hand, which makes it so the best defense grants even more overhealth, that increases with the amount of life you have, and it also makes it so that whenever you gain overhealth, you grant an extra 25% of it to the nearest ally so that they also get protected. You take Aftershock, not because you're going for an AP build, but just because Seismic Slam is already the best ability in the game for triggering the best defense, your passive for overhealth. So double triggering your Seismic Slam means you get way more overhealth. And lastly, honestly, there isn't really a good power to put in the 4th slot, so I've just got Seismic Rally, even though I think it's a bit sus. Just because, like, I mean, it does fit with the style of the build, but if you want to do anything else there, really, you can try something else, it's fine. It really doesn't matter too much what you got in that 4th slot. Anyway, I recommend taking the increased damage reduction on block here. I recommend taking cooldown reduction with Ironclad Exhaust, of course. Zoomfist is a must here. You are going to be constantly poking people with ability-based damage to trigger your passive, and then using the healing and the move speed from this to be able to evade being murdered. Vanadium Injection, you're almost certainly never going to be using your ultimate now because you're tanky enough to live on your own, so you want the massive boost from Vanadium Injection. Martian Mender, just more cooldown reduction, more self-heal. Power Matrix, just more blocking. Rüstung von Wilhelm, more health. Veka Z series, more health. This one's second here, even though it's cheaper, just because this one's really bad compared to this one, so I'd only get it if you already have this and you want more of it. And then for the flex slot, again, we just got cushion padding for stuns. Gloom Gauntlet, in case you're going to go for melee stuff, because that does heal you and give you move speed to get out. Divine Intervention for burst damage. And Kitsune Charm for if there is such an enormous amount of CC that you really can't just get away with just cushion padding. Either way, that's kind of my take on the current state of Doomfist right now. I think he is kind of god-awful. I do think, in fairness, people are acting like you literally can't play him and expect to win ever. And I do think if you are particularly good at him and you play the right builds, it is possible to eke out wins on Doomfist. But my god, you have got to try so hard. And it is a thankless job. Like, even if you are doing a great job, everyone will scream at you because you picked Doomfist. It is depressing, but it is also just the current state of Stadium. So yeah, as I say, there needs to be huge sweeping buffs to Doomfist's AP playstyle, and the weapon power playstyle either needs to find more stuff to do other than just quick melee things, or it needs to make the quick melee stuff actually worth using. So yeah, either way, that means we can now move on to Wuyang. Now, Wuyang is one I feel weird about. You might see that there's a lot of different builds here prepared. However, it's not actually necessarily because Wuyang has super creative builds going on. It's more so that all of his stuff overlaps so much and melts together so much that there are like different ways of doing the same kind of thing that are still important enough in difference that like they feel like they're a different build, but they're also kind of pretty similar to the other builds. So, yeah. Anyway. For the early game on Wuyang, I always will either take Armoured Vest or First Aid Kit. If they've got people who are bad against armour, usually flankers, I will take Armoured Vest. If they got more poke-heavy stuff, which deals burst damage, I'm going to take First Aid Kit, because then armour's really bad against that, and the increased regen time is way more valuable. Compensator for extra damage, pretty self-explanatory. Power playbook for AP, pretty self-explanatory. One important thing to note, Wuyang does have a weird thing going on, where the passive healing for putting a healing mark on someone is AP-based, but the active healing for beaming people is weapon-based. So his heal is actually both it's half weapon and half AP simultaneously, which is kind of weird to get your head around, but that is how it works. Obviously, for the greedy stuff, I just have charge plating again. But there's a lot of stuff in the flex slot. If you want to go for extra survivability, you can go for ballistic buffer plus an armored vest or first aid kit for extra survivability versus poke. If they've got a lot of CC or debuffs, you might want to take reflex coating for the extra overhealth. The lifesteal can be good if you are versus a tank that just doesn't really have a way to avoid your bubbles, and you can just steer them into it constantly and get a bunch of life off of it. But that's going to be pretty rare. That's mostly going to be good against characters like Orisa, who don't really have many tools. Whereas if it's against a Queen, who's going to be a bit more evasive, or against a Diva who can just eat your stuff, it's not going to be great. And you can take Stratosphere Beacon, because you are able to hit flyers as Wuyang, but I will say hitting flyers as Wuyang is not going to be as consistent as you might think it is, even if you are pretty good at steering it, just because of the slow projectile speed. So this is an option, but I wouldn't usually take it. Either way, moving on to the first way I decided to play him, we got Weapon Power Heal. So I'll admit, this is a little different from what I did when I first picked him up, because the first thing I looked at was this. Using Active Restorative Stream on an ally heals Wuyang for 75% of this healing. I'm not going to lie, I was pretty convinced this was going to be ridiculous. I thought, 75%? I mean, Wuyang's beam heals pretty fast too. That might be a really big deal. And so I was pretty convinced that this was going to be a great way to make yourself unkillable on Wuyang, kind of similar to how powerful Zen's Self-Harmony Orb is. However, I'm not going to say this power is outright terrible, but it was disappointing. It didn't actually self-heal as much as I was expecting. It still self-healed an okay amount, but I no longer think this is a super great power. It's certainly usable, but it's not a high priority. So either way, back to the build itself. I actually think the best one to start with is Tidekeeper, the one where when you heal people with the beam actively, it reduces the cooldown of Guardian Wave. You then have a power that makes it so that when you use Guardian Wave, you shoot 2 additional Water Orbs. Weirdly enough, it doesn't work the way the perk does. It's that, instead of a triangle shape, it's like a line, which is a bit weird. Don't really know why they bothered changing that. I kind of prefer the triangle shape. I feel like this is a little less practical, but whatever. It's the exact same stats as the perk, though, where they each deal 40% of the usual damage, but that adds up to a total of 20% bonus damage if all 3 hit. You then can take Undertow for each primary fire that you hit, which is obviously tripled with this. You gain 5% healing resource and reduce the cooldown of Rushing Torrent by a second. And finally, you have the self-healing when healing others as the final power slot. You can steer orbs more effectively here. This is really more for damage in fairness, but it's also just a very cheap and pretty important thing to take, so it's here. More max resource with also some health and some 10% weapon power is just a really good deal. Advanced Antibiotics. Attack speed is useless on Wuyang unless you take a certain power, at least for damage, but it does still impact healing. So, considering this only triggers when you heal people anyway, I think this is worth it, at least if you're focusing on the healing mostly. And, yeah, of course, just more weapon power. Into the late game stuff, you got more active healing power, so a 25% boost to your healing output, as well as 25% boost to your range, plus another 10% weapon power. Amari's Antidote, so that you get 15% bonus healing versus people who are on low health, as well as getting just more weapon power and health. Metal College module makes it so that you get 35% attack speed while using Rushing Torrent, as well as 15% weapon power at all times. This is an enormous boost to your total DPS and healing per second, but again, unfortunately, without that specific power, the DPS part doesn't matter, but still, the healing does matter. You can get way more healing. Like, the 15% and 35% boost stack with each other multiplicatively, too. You've got to understand. This is also just more attack speed for more heals, and also makes it so that you get more movement speed when you're Rushing Torrent or Wave. And for the flex slot, we just got cushion padding. Once again, just every build practically is going to have this in the flex slot. It's so good. Tidefill Basin is not super necessary, but you might want it. It gives you more healing resources if you're running out constantly, and it does give shields, and it's pretty cheap. Overdrive Core, again, Wuyang is still pretty squishy in this mode, and it is actually pretty hard to stay alive on him unless you play very safe, but sometimes playing very safe can cause you to lose a lot of value. So I do think it's nice, and I think it's actually worthwhile, even though it only triggers once, to have this item, where you get a little bit of extra health, a little bit of extra damage, but you also get the ability to get 300 over health just before you die to keep yourself alive, even if it's just once per life. I'm going to be real with you, there are going to be so many situations, I think, where you are basically going to have to make a hero play on Wuyang, where you're probably going to die for it, but it's important that you do that thing. And even just the fact of being able to cheat death once is usually going to be a pretty big deal. Especially if it's once per life. Like, if it was once in the entire round, maybe not worth it. But once per life, pretty good deal overall. And lastly, Eye of the Spider, just a whole bunch more weapon power for a whole bunch more healing and a whole bunch more damage. Now, alternatively, you have the spam build, which uses, where is it? Yeah, Wavelengths. I think this power is probably good, but I don't like it, because it feels weird and janky to use, but it is kind of important, I think, if you want to be a damage dealer on Wuyang. This makes it so that when you don't control your orbs, they fling out way further. What am I doing? I'm so focused on showing off the distance and all that. Yeah, basically they fly out at double speed, and they shoot straight instead of, like, flopping, you can see. This is supposed to make it so that you can just spam like this, and it's not terrible. It just feels bad, though. Like, I'm not saying it is weak. I think from what I've tested and what I've used, it's actually relatively strong. But it just feels bad to use, you know? So I really don't like using this, but it is pretty important. Without this, like, attack speed is useless on this character for anything but healing. And obviously this one in particular is a more damage-focused build. And obviously, in fairness, does have a lot of synergy with Undertow. For the last power here, we just have the healing his Guardian Wave again, because Guardian Wave is needed to get pain drops. And also Guardian Wave is important for healing yourself, which this build isn't too focused on survivability, because it wants to be a bit of a glass cannon, but still, you're going to need some survivability, otherwise you're just going to be exploding constantly. So yeah, cooldown reduction is important because, well, these cooldowns kind of trigger the bonus, like, orbs and all that. As I say, you want to hard focus this as early as possible because 15% extra weapon power and 35% extra attack speed is ridiculous. Volskaya Ordnance takes advantage of the fact that you are going to be really low health, so it deals bonus damage. Booster Shirts, again, movement speed and attack speed. Mario Sensitive, again. Eye of the Spider, again. Codebreaker, if you're going to be spamming orbs and you're going to have triple orbs, that means that you're going to be much worse against armor, so, you know, being able to break through armor is nice. Salvage Slugs, you're going to get through ammo really fast, and if you're dealing with barriers, you're often going to be, you know, losing ammo to the barriers, so being able to regenerate your ammo and do more damage to barriers is nice. Shield Buster, I mean, there's just going to be a lot of situations, again, where armor's going to be a problem, so that's there. And Super Serum. I'm not going to lie, I don't know how necessary this is, but it's just a very fun item that is very rarely used, that I think does have its moments where it shines. I wouldn't necessarily call it super underrated, because I do think it is more of a for fun thing than a strong thing, but I do think sometimes people act like it is useless, because I never see it getting used at all, and actually, I mean, it can lead to some pretty substantial DPS boosts. Like, actually, I just realized I should probably... Yeah, oh no, I do have the powers. Okay, right, well, let's just grab some extra... You know, I'll take this, and I'll take this, and take this. Okay, right. So, observe. That's fun. That is very fun. And we'll try without Super Serum in a second. I've just got to wait for Guardian Wave to come off cooldown again. Without Super Serum, it's still pretty quick, honestly. Yeah. So at the very least, you can do some very ridiculous damage with this build. and be an absolute glass cannon, but you also got to worry about the fact you're going to be exploding if you do this. There's an AP wave build, which is boring, but I'm not going to lie, I think it's actually kind of effective, and it's one of the most consistent ways to play Wuyang. Unfortunately, Ebb and Flow, despite literally just being the perk, basically, the wave returns to you when, like, you know, and it double heals you. It is pretty good. Even though the damage is reduced by 50% when it comes back, the healing is still 100%. So you still receive full, like, it's basically just a double to the self-heal from Ebb and Flow. From your wave. So that is really, really important, and I recommend taking it first just because it helps you stay alive, and that's difficult on Wuyang in Stadium. Being able to get Guardian Wave faster, obviously you're going to be using Guardian Wave all the time, it's nice. Splish Splash is this interesting power where you can melee while using Rushing Torrent, and it has a 15-second cooldown, and it spawns a mini wave that still has all the properties of the usual wave, just like with less stats, and it also does a splash. Now, you might have seen weapon power there. The weapon power stuff only applies to the splash because it's technically a quick melee, which obviously is tied to weapon power, but the wave itself, I believe, is still AP. So, this is a weird power that works both with AP and weapon power simultaneously, though I think the AP side of it is more important, which is why it's in an AP build. Essentially, the idea, of course, is, hey, wave is a pretty long cooldown, so if you're going to have a build based off of wave, you should probably have 2 waves. Even if the other one is an even longer cooldown and it might be a little bit weaker, it's still worth. And lastly, I got Tidal Save, where the Guardian Wave heals double to people who have a healing mark on them over the next 4 seconds. And I think that would also work with the heal lamp, so that actually does add up to quite a lot. There are some wave powers I'm leaving out here. In fact, let me just, there is one where Wuyang gets a wave around him, like this, in an AoE, that I'm not using. Which, okay, to be fair, what I was about to say is, I just think that this one kind of sucks, and it's only really good if you're actually somehow missing your waves at point-blank range, but if you are, then, like, what the hell are you doing? However, I didn't actually know that it worked with Ebb and Flow like that, where the AoE re-triggers, but I guess that makes sense. Even still, though, I feel like that's probably pretty bad. So I'm not too convinced this is a worthwhile power, so that's why I skip it. It just seems like, how are you going to miss a wave at that short a range, you know? And if you're not missing the wave, then why do you need the splash, you know? Anyway, so yeah, cooldown reduction, just a nice mix of AP, weapon power, and health. More AP. For each target hit by Guardian Wave, gain 10% healing resource, you know, just so you don't run out of healing resource, even if that's not necessarily the main thing you're doing here. If you are going to be heal lamping people, the next thing you're usually going to do, even if it's not a weapon power build, is heal beam them, so that's nice. It's also just more AP and shields. Iridescent Iris for more AP and more cooldown reduction for more waves. Catalytic Crystal so that you get more ult charge and you get more AP. Waterfall Wetsuit so that you can get overhealth to stay alive more easily when you wave yourself, and cooldown reduction, which is pretty nice. A pretty significant amount too. 35% AP, again, just more AP. In the flex slot, we got Water College Hat. This is a decent item, but it's also not really a must-have, so it kind of depends on how much you think this is worth it. It makes it so the restorative stream lasts an extra 50% in duration after they break line of sight with you. Gives you more shields, and gives you the ability to overheal up to 30 over health past the maximum, or double that, like, you know, more than double that potentially if you increase your AP. However, that's obviously not a lot, but in fairness, like, you know, especially early rounds, if you have flankers, this is obviously going to be pretty helpful. So yeah, if you've got people who are going to be flanking, and even just a little bit of overhealth gives them the edge, this is good. But if you're going to be brute forcing it down mid, this is not very good. Super Flexor is a good way to get a balance of AP, health, and weapon power. And it actually is pretty good with Wuyang. You'd think it might be bad because every single time you land a shot, it's like, you know, really slow firing, and you're only hitting one target, so you'd think you just get one stack. However, you actually get 3 if you look in the corner there. Actually, well, I got 4 there because it's splashing and hitting the second target, but if I use it against this Roadhog, if I wait out, boom, 3 stacks. So I immediately get 15% AP, and then the second one immediately gets me to 25, the maximum. Now, I'm not entirely sure, but this is my guess as to why that is. I already found a while ago when bug testing in Stadium practice range that there's an interesting phenomenon where if you're using a shotgun character and you have Super Flexor, if you have a shotgun blast that simultaneously half hits the head and half hits the body, then you actually get 2 stacks. It seems that it counts the head shot and the body shot as separate shots, and so you get double the amount of stacks. Well, Wuyang, even though he can't headshot, what I think is happening here is that he's getting 1 stack for the direct hit of the orb, a 2nd stack for the splash of the orb, and then a 3rd stack from the splash also hitting the head hitbox. Maybe, I'm not entirely sure, but I think even though he doesn't get the headshot damage, it still connects to both hitboxes and registers the hit twice. And then when you add the direct damage on top of that, that's 3 stacks. So it only takes 2 bubbles in a row to immediately get to 20% AP boost. And that's also assuming that you're not getting splash damage. With splash damage, it could be 1 single bubble to get to max stacks. That being said, it is also still a short window, so it's a little bit difficult to take advantage of, which is why it's in the flex slot rather than just being in the base build. There's this item over here, which is basically just 15% AP and 50% extra heal boost on the wave. It also reveals enemies hit by Guardian Wave, but I'm not going to lie, I don't think that's super important. You won't be using wave offensively very much in this build, I would say. I don't think this is super necessary, but there might just be some situations where you're getting loads of value off of Heal Lamp and you want it to last longer. But if that's not the case, then don't bother with this. And lastly, Refresher. A gadget that doesn't see a lot of use, but I do think this build is one of the few times it might be worth using, depending on the context, just because you're so dependent on spamming wave to keep yourself alive. So if you ever run out of waves, because it is a long cooldown, here you go. You've got a tool you can use to give you a wave back so that you can live just a little bit longer. It is a very long cooldown, it's 60 seconds, but on top of that, like, you shouldn't be running out of waves frequently unless you're playing very stupidly, so oftentimes I don't think this should be a problem. I think that should be fine. The only thing is it might be a bit expensive, but we'll see. Either way, in terms of the other AP build, we have the AP AoE build. So I think this is probably the build that has the potential to get the most heals. The problem is that you're going to need your team to constantly play bunched up and just run it down mid like a bunch of angry hornets. You can't be splitting up if you use this build, and that sucks because that means you get very poor angle control. But to be fair, most people who play Stadium seem to be very bad at understanding angle control anyway. There's a lot of people that do just like to run it down mid, so, like, you know, depends on your comp, but with the right comp, this is great. So anyway. Rushing Torrent makes it so that everyone in your line of sight gets a passive restorative stream stack on them simultaneously. If you can get the whole team with this, it is huge boost to your healing. But obviously it's very awkward getting it, and obviously it's only while Rushing Torrent is active. And it's only if they have LOS at the time you hit the Rushing Torrent, and it obviously runs out when it runs out of Rushing Torrent. So, like, even if you start a Rushing Torrent behind a wall and then immediately turn the corner and then you can see your whole team, you don't get the boost. You have to be able to see your whole team when you press the button, and then it stays until, you know, you run out of Rushing Torrent. Anyway, so yeah, that's a big way to get loads of AoE heals, which is already really, really good, but also very awkward to use. You've got to make sure everyone's grouped up and in your LOS. You then have Puddle Stomp, which is essentially whenever you jump using Rushing Torrent, you drop a puddle that does an AoE heal that's AP based, and the further you drop, the more heals it gives. Once again, it's pretty underwhelming under normal circumstances. However, if you are AoE healing, it's huge. So once again, you're going to want to get big AoE heals off of this, but you're going to want to have your team play super grouped up if you want to get that benefit. You have Flow State, so that you can increase the duration of Rushing Torrent by using your Heal Beam. You're not going to be doing super amounts of healing with your Heal Beam, but the extra the extra Rushing Torrent is a very big deal, considering, you know, so much of this stuff is dependent on Rushing Torrent. And lastly, the double healing on Wave, even though this isn't really a Wave build, just makes sense if everyone's going to have passive healing marks on them. You've got multi-tools, so you can get cooldown reduction, so you can get more Waves and more Rushing Torrents to get more AoE heals. Custom stock, again, is just a good mix. Good amount of AP, even more cooldown reduction and survivability, more cooldown reduction in AP, more ult charge gain, more AP, armor regeneration plus more AP. And then for the flex slot, Martian Mender, just if you really want a lot of cooldown reduction. Waterfall Wetsuit is another way to get even more cooldown reduction. It depends how much you want to go all in on it. That can also give you some overhealth to stay alive. Super Flexor, once again, if you want to get a mix of weapon power and AP. And finally, Vanadium Injection. In theory, this build should be farming ult pretty fast, so if you want to get the maximum ability out of your ult, you probably don't want this. But if you are struggling to farm your ult because people aren't playing super grouped up, then this might be a good way to, you know, if you're getting it slowly, I think it's much better to just get your ult once and not use it, at least, or maybe even just save it to the very end of the round and play most of the round with Vanadium Injection, compared to using one ultimate that probably isn't going to be that good anyway, you know. If you're at the point where you're finally getting enough ult charge, you can farm it really quickly, then obviously, yeah, screw Vanadium Injection, just spam your ult. But if you're only going to get one ult and it's probably not going to do a whole lot, then yeah, you probably would rather have the boost from Vanadium Injection. Lastly, this one isn't really a build, but I just want to show you a bit of missed potential here. Wuyang has some very interesting items that unfortunately have no synergy as far as I can tell with his powers. It's just like item stuff. and that is, he's got a synergy with shield HP specifically, which I really like the idea of, but unfortunately I have tried it out, and I feel like it's very underwhelming. Essentially, you got a Torrential Transistor here, which gives 50 shields, and the first part of this is pretty irrelevant. It basically makes it so that the overhealth granted from your ultimate also gets partially shared with people around them, but more importantly, while you still have shield health, you just have a 15% boost to all of your ultimate charge, which is pretty interesting. But what's even more interesting, and more important probably, is Hydromender. 25 shields, restore 2% of your shield health every single second, no condition, just you're always restoring health, and then on top of that, while Rushing Torrent is active, you can increase that to 12%. That's a pretty big deal, at least so it seems. So you could take these two and constantly have health regeneration at all times, plus extra bonus ult charge. You could then combine this with Reinforced Titanium, an item that anyone can use but rarely does get used because usually it's not worth going all in on shields, to make it so that while you still have shields, you get 15% damage reduction versus ability damage and you gain 5% AP. Combine that with Vishkar Condenser to convert more of your health into shields, and maybe some other items here. If you want the most shield health possible, you're going to want Divine Intervention plus Vanadium Injection. And what do you know? We got this massive HP bar, we're getting more ultimate charge from everything we do, and on top of that, we are constantly regenerating health at all times, even while we're taking damage. Now, the problem is, okay, we're going to take some real damage now from these rocket bots. And I'm not saying this health regeneration is god-awful, but this is basically the best it gets. I'm pretty sure it's not possible to get more shield health than this. And, yeah. Now, when you use Rushing Torrent and up it from 2% to 12%, it's certainly a lot better, but yeah, it's not super impressing me. So yeah, I like the idea here, but like, you gotta give us more to work with. This is underwhelming. So anyway, I know I've spent a while just yapping about different builds here. What's my problem with this? Okay, Wuyang feels decent to play. He doesn't feel awful to play, but he just feels, I don't know, a little boring. It feels like there's not a lot of cool creative things you can do with him. It's more so there's a lot of pretty bland standard things you can do with him, but there's lots of ways to do it. And even as someone who can sometimes really get into the intricacies, I do find this a little bit disappointing. Especially considering I feel like there's probably a lot more you could do with Wuyang and his kit. It feels like this is a pretty underwhelming showing. Honestly, as well as that, like, the only stuff that is interesting is probably, like, the wavelength stuff, but that's also the stuff that feels really janky and weird, and I don't like it, so, like, yeah, that's not great. As well as that, I'm gonna be honest with you, Wuyang does feel weird, just, like, not even to do with his builds, like, his powers and his items. Just generally the way he plays in Stadium feels a bit weird, because of the fact that, okay, the way that his damage is tuned in the base game is very much so that he can punish flankers very effectively if he can see them coming beforehand by steering orbs so that they can't use cover, you know, so that they're still taking damage even if they use cover as they approach. And that can often mean that even if you just land one orb, you're probably not getting a kill off of that, but you are preventing them from even being able to engage in the first place. Like, you can't engage on a backline if a Wuyang lands just one orb on you before you arrive. If you're Genji, and you lose nearly half your HP to an orb before you arrive in the fight, you can't just dash in there and deflect and hope for the best. You're going to lose. So you have to take a second to chill and disengage, and you have to give the enemy space and time as a result. However, in Stadium, because of the way that health and all that can fluctuate, there are a lot of situations where Wuyang starts to feel weird. That, like, you have moments where your orbs feel like they aren't doing a lot because people have builds that just allow them to tank them pretty heavily, but then you can have moments where your orbs are suddenly one-shotting again and you feel like a god, but then you can go straight back to, oh wait, my orbs are doing nothing, never mind. It does feel weird. You never really know. You don't have that consistent feedback with Wuyang. Sometimes it feels like you hit things and they explode, and sometimes it feels like you hit things and they shrug it off effortlessly. And that can be really, really weird to get used to, and it does make his value very inconsistent. You know, in the base game, you're consistently doing a lot on Wuyang if you're hitting a lot of orbs. But in Stadium, I think there's a lot of situations where you can't really count on getting a whole lot of Wuyang by just landing a bunch of orbs. Sometimes it will be big value, and sometimes it will just achieve nothing. Anyway, with all of that, though, I have been doing a lot of whining, and let's at least get to the good bit. The cast rework. Because, yeah, surprisingly enough, the cast rework is kind of the good bit. I'm going to be honest with you, I was not super bothered about this. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm kind of glad that Cass got a rework. I felt like he was in this position where he technically didn't need a rework, but I definitely wanted him to get a rework. I think that he functioned, but was just very boring. And now he's definitely more interesting. I definitely like what they've done here. Essentially, I don't even remember all the stuff they did, but a bunch of powers have been replaced or reworked, and the cliff notes here is that I think the most important power to note that was removed is they did remove the power where getting more ammo gives you more damage. That was a really stupid power. It was just kind of an auto take in basically every build, and it really encouraged very boring, very, very low skill play styles. So, very glad that's gone. They've been given much more interesting kind of powers for weapon power casts that much more encourage him to play more actively, which is very welcome. Stadium needs a lot more of that. Stadium is often encouraging people to play very statically and passively and just farm stats and not actually contribute to making space or helping teammates. So I always like to see stuff that encourages people to get active and actually do things. But on top of that, we also got massive buffs to the Deadeye package, so that now it's actually a real build, and even some sort of interesting buffs to the dodge roll package. We'll get to that in a second. Either way, this is my usual early game on casts. I don't think it's actually different from before, like this rework. You obviously want weapon power usually. Ballistic buffer is sometimes a good idea if you really want to prioritize survivability. I actually think casts usually it's better to go for survivability than damage. I know there's a lot of people that go all in on damage, but I just think survivability is better with casts in most cases. So yeah, ballistic buffer. And then once again, armored vest or first aid kit, depending on the context. For greedy stuff, you could take attack speed, lifesteal on weapon, or you could take bonus ammo if he wants to do more damage, but as I say, I think the survivability is usually a better call. And obviously for flex slot, reflex coating is good if they've got debuffs or CC, and stratosphere beacon if you need to anti-air in the first couple rounds. But for the most part, I would stick to this top row. Now, your standard cast build, at least the way I would do it, with a bit more emphasis on survivability, has not changed enormously, but it's got some really nice tweaks. So first of all, I will admit, you might think, what the hell is this doing in the standard cast build, this dodge roll power? I'm just going to be real with you, this is just such a general good power in basically every cast build, that I pretty quickly realized that I had way more success taking this as my first power, even in weapon power casts, than actual weapon power cast related stuff. Just get an extra damage reduction and self-heal on dodge roll when it's only a 6-second cooldown. You get a quarter of your life back every dodge roll when you get it every 6 seconds, and on top of that, you get more damage reduction. Really good deal. You should take it like first round in most cases. So that's there for that reason. But then we actually get to the new stuff. For the powers, we got Buck Wild, which makes it so that you get 1% extra move speed for every shot you land. That move speed stays for 5 seconds and refreshes every time you land another shot. And if you manage to get it up to 15 stacks, it maxes out there at 15% move speed, but it also gives you a bonus 10% damage reduction while you're at maximum stacks. So that basically encourages you to play chill at first, land a few shots, but then once you've got some move speed, use that move speed and damage reduction to go in there and make a play, which I love. Great power already. On top of that, we got Dead Man Walking to help with your consistency a little, which I really do like because I felt like most of Cass's powers were making him spikier rather than more consistent. Dead Man Walking makes it so that when enemies are close to death at 30% or lower, they now have marked heads, which are larger hitboxes, which also give you 50% weapon lifesteal versus them. So just so you have an idea of what that looks like, if I headshot this bot, boom. That's what it looks like. Now, awkwardly, there seems to be a bug with the bots where they don't actually have a bigger head hitbox when it's the bots, but the normal characters it does seem to work with. So, now, I'm pretty sure that shouldn't hit. I kind of shut my crosshair a bit there, but let's see. I feel like, it's hard to do this perfectly, but yeah, I feel like that doesn't usually hit, and the extra size really just helps with a bit more consistently see and keeping yourself alive with lifesteal. So yeah, and then lastly, this is pretty similar. He still has the power where landing headshots reduces his combat rolls cooldown by 2 seconds, but it now has the added bonus that Flashbang also reduces it by 2 seconds. So even if you're not super consistent with your headshots, you can still trigger it with Flashbang, which is still a decent effect. Anyway, in terms of items early game, we got a new item which gives you 50% extra combat roll distance while giving 25 health and a 5% cooldown reduction for only 4,500. Amazing deal. I'm going to be real with you. I don't care what build you're running with Cass. You take this in every single Cass build. Literally every Cass build should run this. It's amazing. And it's super fun being able to play with much more mobile Cass. Quick load chamber just for extra reload speed. It's not even really for the effect so much, although sometimes the effect is useful. Just the extra reload speed is really good. Extra damage. Vanadium injection, because you're not going to be using Deadeye with this build. Phantasmic Flux, so that you're getting lifesteal off of poking that enemy tank, so that you can poke them more safely. More attack speed and move speed. Because dodge roll's on such a short cooldown, and you can get more dodge rolls with Bullseye, you're going to want that move speed plus for every dodge roll. It also leads to situations where you can flash and fan people more consistently. More damage, more damage. In the flex slot, once again, cushion padding. Streamline Poncho is maybe a bit out of place here, it seems, giving you more flashbangs when this isn't really an AP build. But the reason it's here is because it's a 10% cooldown reduction for 5,000 credits. That is insane. 10% cooldown reduction is worth about 10,000 credits. So getting it for 5,000 is ridiculous. It is very rare you see a character that lets you do this, and I'm pretty sure Cass is the only character in the game where you can get a 10% cooldown reduction for anywhere near this cheap. It is insanely good. So even if you're not doing weapon power, I still think this is a pretty good one. But also the fact that it isn't weapon power does make it a bit awkward to fit in, which is why it's in the flex slot. Eagle Eye, just so that you get more health and take less damage from enemies that aren't really close to you. Typically worth it, but it's up to you. And if you're struggling with other DPS and you really need to duel them more effectively, this item will give you 20% lifesteal versus DPS characters, while giving you more damage. Pretty good. Now, that's pretty standard Cass, but what about the Deadeye build? The Deadeye build is actually good now. I'm confident in saying it. I think they finally did it. I've been trying to make Deadeye Cass work for a while, and the conclusion I came to with the pre-rework Deadeye Cass is it's technically not actually as far off as you might have thought of from working. Late game, Deadeye Cass was no joke. Late game, Deadeye Cass was actually kind of a monster of a build. But that's the problem. It's not just you have to get to the late game, it's on top of that, most builds that do better in the late game at least have a serviceable early game. You have something in the early game, you're not just useless. Deadeye Cass, you actually are just, throwing for the first 3 or 4 rounds of the game. And usually it only takes about 3 or 4 rounds of throwing for you to just lose the entire match and never even have the chance of seeing the late game. I obviously had constantly tried to find ways when I played Deadeye Cass to not lean too hard into the Deadeye until the end game to try and, balance that out, and that was definitely the way to go. But even still, the only way I could really make that work is to go for mostly survivability items early on, which wasn't a bad idea, it did work decently, but I found that usually what would happen is, if it worked, I would just win the game before I got to use any Deadeye stuff. And if it didn't work, then you'd just lose the game before you got to use any Deadeye stuff. No matter what happened, you'd never get to use your Deadeye package. So, it kind of wasn't even a Deadeye build anymore when it worked. It was just, a survivability Cass build that happened to have Deadeye powers in the late game that you never actually get to use. Now, I think they have both made it so you can get Deadeye powers much faster, as well as making the Deadeye powers stronger, and requiring it that you don't need to get as many, you only need to get 2 rather than 3. It's so much better now. So, anyway, once again, just roll with it. It's such a good power that I take it first basically every build with Cass, so that's why it's here. But other than that, we have Easy Rider over here, which combines 2 previous powers together. Hot Potato is now part of Easy Rider. That was the one where when you flashbang someone, you gain 20% ultimate charge if you kill them immediately afterwards. That was a terrible power. Now it's part of this power, which is much better. And this is much better because this power gives you 100 over health that can be increased by AP, and also 25% move speed when you pop Deadeye, so that it's way harder to interrupt your Deadeye, and it's way easier to chase people with Deadeye. This is already a really good power and was one of the better parts of the Deadeye build. And it's great to see it combined with the increased ultimate charge gain so that it's much more consistent. On top of that, we got a new Deadeye power. It's 12 o'clock somewhere to increase the consistency even more, making it so that Deadeye eliminations refund 25% of your ultimate charge, and if you get no eliminations, you get 33% refunded. So the worst case scenario is you kill one person and only get a 25% refund, but if you kill no one, you get 33% refund, if you kill 2, 50%, 3, 75%, and if you kill 4 or more people, you get an instant refund and you just get to Deadeye again whenever the hell you want, which is really, really cool, even though that's going to be rare. So, yeah. On top of that, you also got Hot Potato. This is not super important, but this is the last power here. This makes the flashbang magnetic, like the magnetic grenade. However, it also has much less range than the magnetic grenade does, but at least the range is 50% larger than the usual flashbang. So yes, you put it all together, and yeah, you have a build that's kind of about survivability in the early game that then transfers into a Deadeye build. You might notice there's something absent here, that usually there's a Deadeye power that slows people in your line of sight, which is also one of the powers that actually makes Deadeye decent, because slowing people makes it obviously hard for them to escape the Deadeye. That is now an item, which makes it so much easier to ramp up to the Deadeye build quicker. I'm very glad this is an item now. So it's over here. Using Deadeye slows all visible enemies by 30% for 2.5 seconds, as well as giving health and ability power so you can kill with Deadeye faster. Anyway, going to the early game and going at actual order here. Duck and roll again, must take. Streamline Poncho, cooldown reduction plus more flashbangs, which we need to get ult charged, so take that. Iron Eyes, movement speed, helps you chase people, also lets you take less headshot damage and gives you more health, nice to have. Ironclad exhaust ports, more health plus more cooldown reduction, which means more flashbangs and more dodge rolls to chase people down, just makes sense. Snakebite, of course, for the slow on Deadeye. Improvised Dynamite makes it so the flashbang's AoE radius is larger, as well as just having really good stats. It's a 10% cooldown reduction with a 20% AP boost. That's actually better than Iridescent Iris, which is already a really good item, so very highly recommend. Iridescent Iris is also good, even more cooldown reduction. And this one might catch you off guard. Colossus Core. So, this is a very, very rarely used gadget. It's got a 25-second cooldown, it gives you 10% extra health, armor, and shields, it gives you 40% knockback resistance, 40% slow resistance, and an activated ability that is interesting. It makes you a giant that is immune to all forms of CC and unstoppable. It also gives you 25% damage reduction, a 25% boost to your health bar. However, the downside is that you deal 25% reduced damage and healing for the 5 seconds that it's in effect. You might be wondering what this is doing here. Well, if you are trying to play Cass into Orisa, who I think is Cass's best counter in Stadium, you are never going to land a Deadeye, because you're just going to get speared every time. But what if they can't spear you? Listen, there's lots of stuff you can take that's anti-CC, but most of it is stuff that just makes it so that if you get CC'd, you don't die. It doesn't actually stop the CC from interrupting your ultimate, it just means that when the CC interrupts your ultimate, it doesn't kill you, it just takes your ultimate away. This actually stops the CC from killing your ultimate. So I've actually already used this in a game versus an Orisa that was constantly trying to ult cancel me, and there were so many moments where I got to completely shut them down and surprise them by using Colossus Core to just completely tank their spear and just say, I don't care. Now, it does make your Deadeye kill slower, but if you've already got a decent amount of AP, that really won't matter. Your Deadeye is going to be pretty unavoidable with the move speed and everything. So, yeah, the one thing that you do have to know, though, that's very important is that the first time I tried to do this, I messed up massively, because I thought you'd be able to use the gadget while in Deadeye. You have to activate it before you activate Deadeye, otherwise it'll be locked out. So you have to press it first, and then press Deadeye, and then boom, boom, boom. Oh, that's weird. Oh, it actually looks to bug. Oh, that's not good. Okay, so I think what just happened there is it bugged the out, and it doesn't take into account the reduced damage from Colossus Core when showing the skulls on Deadeye. So I had a full skull on this soldier and it didn't kill him. Okay, well that's important to know, I guess. But yeah, if I use Deadeye here, you can see there's an X on the gadget, so I can't use it. But you can see how quickly the Deadeye zooms in. I mean, we're not even at full AP here, but to be fair, that's a pretty decent amount of AP, even if it's not maximum. But yeah, you get the idea. Actually, to be fair, that's probably the amount of AP you would have. You wouldn't really take more AP items unless you took Blackwatch tech, but I don't think you would really need it most times. So yeah, let me just get my ultimate one more time and double check the Colossus Core thing. So as I say, you'd want to activate it before popping your ultimate. It's going to last for 5 seconds, and yeah, it doesn't take into account the damage reduction, so that's annoying. So whenever you see the skull on someone, you're going to have to wait just a little bit longer with Colossus Core. Or alternatively, one thing you could do is you could activate the Colossus Core early. In fact, just a moment, 1 second. You could, if you're good at timing, you could activate the Colossus Core early, and then when it's about to run out, use it, tank the CC, shrink, boom, instant damage boost. Because like, you lose damage while you're big, but as soon as the big goes away, you get your damage back. So that would essentially be an instant 25% damage boost. That could be interesting, but that might be difficult to pull off. Anyway, so yeah, that's why Colossus Core is there. It's actually pretty important, I would say, depending on the matchup. Cushion padding, once again, more CC resistance, just really good versus everything. Lumerica Fusion Drive, every single dodge roll that you're going to be getting a lot of is going to be giving you armor, plus it's more AP. Wanted Poster, get more money for killing people with Deadeye, get more health, and also be better with using Deadeye on airborne targets. And Blackwatch Tech, Deadeye eliminations reduce the cooldown of Flashbang by 10%, up to 40% for the round. I actually think this item kind of sucks. It's got a very high potential ceiling, but I think it's very rarely going to pay off. And if it does pay off, it's usually going to be too little too late. However, I thought I should at least put it in the flex slot, because certainly if you do get to the point where you're really snowballing with the Deadeye build, the value ceiling on this is still very high. And so if you can get it to really pop off and it doesn't take forever, it could be worth it. Either way, that is the Deadeye build, and genuinely, the way I've been playing with it so far, it's felt pretty good. It doesn't always get kills, in fairness, but like, if it doesn't get a kill, it almost always forces something else super important. Either it basically gives you a point because the only reason it didn't get a kill is the entire enemy team just disengage and give you a point, or it will like only kill one person, but it will only kill one because basically everyone had to throw them under the bus just to like avoid dying themselves. And like a lot of times that one person is either a hit scan or like a support. It's usually a target that would usually be very difficult to kill otherwise. So yeah. I find that the Deadeye build is actually pretty damn good, and even when you don't have Deadeye, all the survivability tools feel pretty damn good too. Oh yeah, and very quickly, just because I didn't show it earlier, the magnetic grenade stuff looks like this. That's about maximum range for it. I just want to make that clear because, like, the magnetic grenade, as it was back when it was in the base game, had much more range than this, though I'm not complaining because, like, it was a problem. So yeah. Anyway, there's one last build here that I haven't showed off, and that's the roll build. It's not that different, but there's one thing that might seem small, but I think makes a gigantic difference. You see, barrel roll has always been a bit of a memey one. It makes your dodge roll go 50% further, and it allows it to deal ability-based damage. However, it's only 65, which in fairness is a good amount. It gives you an edge in a 1v1, but the problem is that, like, as a build-around, 65 is just not enough to be worth it in the long term. Like, this is good early on. Like, no joke, like, round one, just being able to roll into someone and go further and also, like, take a decent chunk of their health. This is actually pretty good just for evening up 1v1s. But you wouldn't actually take an AP build just to deal damage with dodge roll. For that reason, even though the dodge roll powers are actually pretty good, the dodge roll build as a whole has kind of been a meme. However, I'm not gonna lie, I think it's there now. Main reason being, I assumed when I saw the 50% extra combat roll distance on this new item, it was because they removed it from barrel roll, but they actually haven't. So you can actually stack both of these and get ridiculously far barrel rolls that also can then have the self-heal and extra damage reduction, and then get the cooldown reduction on Bullseye. And this is less impressive, but even still have the flashbang spawn from something flashed. Take some move speed items, take this gadget that lets you do an extra dash, take more move speed, take vanadium injection, I guess, so that we can get even more move speed. And, I don't know, cooldown reduction, I guess, probably. Yeah, cooldown reduction. Okay, right. And now I want you to see just how far you can go with one dodge roll. And then think about the cooldown of this dodge roll, too. And think about, like... think about how frequently you're going to have this. You can see the vision, I hope. So yeah, I just realized it's actually probably slightly better if instead of taking that, I take this for the 10% move speed. But yeah. And of course, you still have the ability to roll into people to damage them. It's not going to be super impressive, but... well, the knockback is pretty impressive. You can actually boot people off the map with it pretty consistently. And again, you're not trying to make the damage impressive. What you're trying to do is be a hyper-mobile cast. The ability to just deal, like, important hit scan pressure on a character that is this hard to dive, because they're already tanky, and then on top of that, they've got, like, you know, the ability to just boomp and then, like, end up on the other side of the map every, like, literally less than 5 seconds, plus an extra dash on this gadget. It's a pretty damn good deal. You're a pretty terrifying target to deal with when you have all this stuff. So yeah, Cass is actually really fun now, and has a decent amount of build variety. I really, really like it. So at the very least, they've done a good job with Cass. That being said, as I say, I still think Doomfist has been a little bit of a travesty, and Wuyang, I mean, he works, but I just feel like they could do so much better, you know? With all that said, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.